We're going to talk about another warm-up that we're going to be doing, and it's going to be a grammar warm-up. My grammar practices are always through sentence modeling. We don't do traditional worksheets. I actually have you looking at model sentences and then creating model sentences just like it. So, the first sentence we're going to start with is compound sentence modeling. So what makes a complete sentence? A subject and a verb. That's all you need, a subject and a verb. Some teachers teach, subject and predicate, and I found that most students don't really know what the word predicate means. So it's not really useful. What you need is a subject and a verb. Now, independent clause. What is an independent clause? Well, it's a sentence that can stand by itself independently. In other words, anything that we call a complete sentence can also be called an independent clause. However, we usually use the term independent clause to refer to something within a larger sentence where we're adding other things to that independent clause. So therefore, that leads to the question, what's a dependent clause? A dependent clause is a clause that cannot stand independently as a sentence by itself. It either doesn't have a subject, or it doesn't have a verb, or some other sort of feature that makes it dependent. And we'll talk more about that as time goes by. Cannot stand by itself. I have a analogy that I use in the classroom when talking about independent clauses and dependent clauses, especially if students are getting confused, if your students are getting confused. I think of an independent clause or independent clauses as adult clauses. Adults can survive independently of anyone else. They can navigate the world on their own and survive. They can stand on their own as independent adults. A dependent clause is like a toddler. Toddler clauses. Toddlers cannot survive without an adult to care for them. They have to have an independent adult that can care for that toddler's needs. Same thing with the dependent clause. The same thing, some students try to link multiple dependent clauses or toddlers together to make a sentence. That can't survive. They die on their own, even if they're in a group. They just are in a large group dying. However, one independent clause can support several dependent or toddler clauses. But it will get tired if there are too many toddlers. So that analogy works for me and works for my students when they start thinking about, can what I've written, this sentence I've written, stand independently as an adult, or is it a toddler and it needs more to be independent? All right, as I said, we are learning grammar through model sentencing. You will open a Google form as a warm-up, just like we're doing our warm-ups every day, and you will fill in your identification information that I always ask you. Then you will scroll down and see an image such as this. You'll brainstorm that image and come up with words and phrases that mean something to you with this image. So I look at it and I'm thinking cold, winter, I'm thinking snow, I'm thinking of a family because you have these three people, one that maybe looks like a child in between the two perhaps adults. I can come up with a whole little story in my head of this image. I think of Arctic. So I come up with all these words and phrases, and in the Google form there's going to be a place where you put those words and phrases. Then you're going to compose your own model sentence. In this case, we are doing a compound sentence, which means that we are linking two independent clauses together, and I'm going to show you how that works. You do that with a comma and a coordinating conjunction, and I'll show you how that works here in a moment. So let's take a model of this. So this is our first image grammar. And of course, I'll start with my name. If I'm a student, we'll have our student Joe McJohn, my infamous student, class period. I have my image here, and here I'm going to type in random words that come to mind. I might, and you can come up with as many as you want. I'd come up Arctic. Do pay attention to the red lines. That helps you. Isolated. Holidays. And etc. You can come up with a whole story, but I've come up with a few words. Now, what is the compound sentence structure? These are posters that I've shared with students in class. If you're a remote learner, you're seeing this for the first time, but you will be able to see these posters and have access to these posters anytime I have you writing sentences or writing essays or any of those things. They'll be displayed in the room, and I'll include them on assignments in Google Classroom where you're having to engage in this. So, what you see here is that a compound sentence with a coordinating conjunction is an independent clause, an adult clause that could stand by itself, but it's linked to another independent clause that can stand by itself. You cannot just ram those two things together and have a good situation, just like, you know, married people need a little buffer sometimes. They need their space between each other in order to have a positive relationship that works. So, how do we do that? How do we link two independent clauses? There are a number of ways, but the one we're looking at now is a comma and a coordinating conjunction. Fanboys. Down here, you can see the fanboys, the coordinating conjunctions for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. While we're doing these particular practices, and we're going to do at least 5 of these over the next week or two, those are the only conjunctions you want to use. So, let's scroll back up and look here at our sentence model. I give you a sentence model every time that you can look at, consult, and even riff off of if you are really struggling. You can adopt it and just change a few words. Every day was a happy day. I have that in blue because it's an independent clause. I could put a period behind it. That's an adult clause. She can stand by herself. And then we have every night was peaceful. We've got a adult independent clause. They both have a subject and a verb. They can stand by themselves. But they're linked together. So with a coordinating conjunction and a comma. You have to have that comma there. The coordinating conjunction is not strong enough to hold the two independent adult clauses together by itself. Likewise, you can't just put a comma and have no conjunction, no coordinating conjunction, because again, it's not strong enough to hold those two independent adult clauses together in harmony, in matrimony, if you will. Also notice I have sometimes students go, well, it's an independent clause, I should always capitalize. You don't capitalize here unless it's a proper name, a proper noun. In this case, it's not, so it's not capitalized. So you have your model here. You have this. Now down here, I tell you, compose a compound sentence using a coordinating conjunction. And it's over the image. It's over the image. Okay, so I corrected my sentence to be a little more informative and clear. Compose a compound sentence using a comma and a coordinating conjunction about the image. Now, if I'm struggling, I may look back at my model and riff off of that. I might say, every day was and we're looking back up at our image. See, I'm struggling because I need to look back at my brainstorming. Every day was fun with every day was beautiful. Every day was beautiful, comma, but every night was cold. Every day was beautiful, but every night was cold. You can use any one of these fanboys. You can then go back and compare your sentence to the sample that we have here. And that is it. That's the whole warm-up. And we'll do that multiple times, and I'll be able to look at your sentence and see if you're struggling, if you're having problems, and then give you targeted instruction. But I will take 5 of these together. We practice at least 5 times on one sentence construction. I'll take 5 of them together, and they will become a grade. If you're a remote student and you have any questions, please email me, contact me, and I'll be happy to give you a little bit more pointed help and instructions based on what you need.